Perfecting and Reforming Personal Religion, Chapter 22, breakdown entitled The Beginning of the Creation of God. And the last chapter, touching on the idea of the experience leading to charity, to edification. And then from charity and edification personally, outwardly to an edifying, charitable experience to where we are now enlightening others due to what has been revealed to us through our experience, and not us, revealed to our conversation's conscience. So what stands out from that previous chapter is a quote: "He that hears my words and believes on them that sent me is passed from death to life." And so here we have again the issue of words. The issue of words being a factor. And words being a factor, adding on to belief, not simply just hearing of words, but the hearing of words involves a processing of words. And a processing of words involves an exercising of words. And an exercising of words involves the creation of a memory. And the creation of a memory from exercising words results in a map of understanding or of wisdom forming within. And so with all of that taking place, now we move on to the next chapter, which is at the beginning of the creation of God. And when we can do all of this, we are becoming the living God's creation. We are becoming the living God's creation, taking words into account, holding words accountable, and then allowing those words to read us instead of us being a reader, being read of the words. We are in turn, by exercising them in what we are coming across, a creation. And this chapter opens up by making it a point to, let the reader know that this is about mental and physical digestion. Mental and physical exercise, mental and physical digestion. Physical in the sense of we are putting into practice or putting into play what is mentally discovered, what is mentally digested, what is mentally uncovered. Now this leads, and is supposed to lead, to an unconscious and automatic doing of the theme, the central theme of the Bible. And that central theme really can't get away from it. That central theme wrapped up into what this book in chapters previous calls creation's law. Wrapped up into that are the 10 precepts articulated as they were given. Those 10 precepts, 1 through 10, they are for our conversation's well-being. Firstly, primarily, they are for our conversation's well-being. It is for our conversation's responsibility. Everything that we have said thus far, has touched on every single one of those 10 precepts without having to name them. And that's what this is about. That's what the experience is about. It's about how automatic and how unconscious the conversation becomes to keeping those 10 precepts. As unconscious as our heart is, as we are to our heart is beating, as unconscious we are to the flowing blood through our veins in that process and how that works. We don't know how that works. That's automatic. For some reason, we don't control it, but it happens. That's what's supposed to be when it comes to our conversation's belief. Our conversation's thoughts and feelings are to automatically, due to the belief that it has from exercising itself in creation's law, which previous chapters and even the one before has told us what it is. Exercising ourselves in that will allow us to freely, automatically, willingly, and unconsciously remember to do, and it's not even a conscious remembering, to do those 10 precepts and to keep them in order. We will not need We will not need idols that are familiar to us. We will not need to covet anything that is not ours. And in us, in ours, not thinking firstly personal, but this is for our conversation primarily. Again, I will always say John 4:24, if God is spirit and we're going to take that to be true, then what these 10 precepts represent are the character of what that spirit is. And so that has to be transferred to the character or to the spirit of our conversation. And so when transferred to the character or to the spirit of our conversation is ordering itself, and we are allowing our conversation to order itself by precepts and by principles that are going to keep it in order and keep it regulated. Our conversation needs to be kept in order and needs to be kept regulated because the experience is one with words. Anything that can get in the way of words, anything that can stop us from processing an experience with words, that is something taking us away from the intended experience. Anything that can substitute, anything that can become a law of righteousness to us is something that's taking us away from the intended experience. But the more that we give our conversation to the words in that one book, to the counsel, to reviewing it, to putting it into practice, this is how we develop a memory and a map for the type of character that is within the Bible, and we will undoubtedly know those 10 precepts. You think back to the garden. Think back to Genesis 1, 2, and 3. Where were the 10 commandments? They weren't there. They weren't there. No one gave them. They didn't exist. There was no thing that said, and the Lord said to Adam, I am the one that led you out of Egypt. Thou shalt have no gods before me. One, and then going on all through. That didn't exist. Why didn't that exist? It didn't exist because the expectation was that the individual then existing would grow familiar with their environment to have a knowledge of those precepts without actually getting them physically. It was the experience and the unsealing of the wisdom contained within creation that was supposed to reveal those 10 precepts to the host of Eden. And that's pretty much the same experience today. Nothing has changed. The error of making those precepts physical took away from the experience to where now they became the idol. And to where now, because they're the idol, you need supplementary things in order to make sure that the idol is maintained. And that just led to more error and to more error and to more error. That's why Paul says if righteousness could have been by the law, it would have been by the law. But it wasn't. That's Galatians 3. Because it just brought error on error on error, because human beings were trying their best to maintain the idol. That didn't exist in Eden. None of that existed in Eden. All that existed was the individual and their experience. All that existed was the individual and the saying of the mind officiating Eden's atmosphere. That's our experience today, and it's supposed to be. And again, how can we know? This is broken down, as mentioned in previous chapter breakdowns, through the illustration of the crucifixion. That body represents not a human body in a real sense. It represents a body of philosophy. It represents a body of philosophical approaches. A conversation. It represents a conversation, plainly. And that representative conversation is the conversation approaching the Creator by deeds, acts, laws, rites, baptisms, so on and so forth. That's crucified. With that crucified, that allows us to know the experience is now going back beyond what Moses gave. And back beyond what Moses gave, back beyond what Abraham was given, back beyond all of it. there was nothing except the individual and their experience with a saying. Should the individual and that saying get to know one another, they would not, and even right now, will not be deceived by that quote-unquote serpent. This is the beginning of the creation of the living God. The creation is not a physical creation. The creation is going on inwardly in regards to the body of our devotional conversation. If we would have that body developed the way it should be developed, and if we would have the intended experience the Bible would allow us to have, well, we have to embrace a certain work here. Because there is no God that we can go to say, do this for me. There is no place you can go to, and there is no pool of water with a God right there next to that pool of water that you can say, dunk me in and I'll be okay. There's also no prayer you can pray to say, help me be okay, without you doing something, without I doing something in order to place myself in the environment of where well-being can be attained. So, again, we have to ask ourselves, and this we and ourselves, in reality, our belief, our faith, needs to confront its own thoughts and feelings about what it really wants. Does it really want the experience for well-being that the Bible is advertising, or does it really want to maintain the nominal existence that it has within the religious world? There has to be a decision made. Because the mind inspiring the words of the Bible would have our human being go through an experience where it is disassociating itself from its own belief to let that belief rise up in consciousness to have an experience of its own, so that our human being then, when seeing and meeting that creation that is formed, may have a guide to strengthen its own self by. And by doing so, forming a union, and by doing so, embracing creation, and embracing creation, understanding that there is not necessarily self that did this act, but the devotion of the conversation to a mind, to a creator. And in so doing, living in a way that's representative of that experience. Living in a way that tells the decency of that experience, that again is representative of that experience and of the initiator, capital I, of that experience. And so when we are able to do, when our conversation is able to do and experience the intended classroom and without force, and when our conversation is able to maintain the character of those 10 precepts without force, without thought, without needing to be remembered, without having anything to stimulate its memory, well, then we can know that we are becoming the creation of the living God. Because our character, our devotional character, is beginning to match the devotional character of the living God. And that's really the issue here. The issue is the issue of devotional character matching devotional character. As we stand, our devotional character does not match the devotional character within the scriptures. The scriptures are given so that we may have an example of a devotional character to mimic. Because it is through the devotional character that our human being is regulated. Now, I have been attached and have been so into the devotional character within the Bible because I have experienced from the lessons learned therein the well-being given to my human being from applying myself to that devotional character. The intelligence of that character surpasses any intelligence I've ever come across, and exists in a realm that I am not even close to. A realm of thanksgiving, a realm of benevolence, a realm of thought, a realm of feeling, a realm of initiative, a realm of industry, a realm of being. And so I've been so drawn to that character, that devotional character, because I've gone through enough to understand that I have to accept the lacking of my human being. It may not be so clear to discern, and even at times may not be so clear to understand, to accept. But when allowing the level of humility, which is something that this book, and we have touched on in previous chapters, when allowing humility to take over the experience, something profound happens. And what happens is you become opened up. I became opened up to understanding. And so when the Bible says he gives grace to the humble, that's not a lie. Grace in Bible terms is a substance used for the increase of understanding. This is what the Bible teaches about grace. Grace is used for the increase of understanding. And if through humility grace is given, that means through humility grace is given for an increase in understanding. And an increase of understanding means having the principles that are etched within the core of the scriptures, etched within the heart of the conversation, so that the human being can have an understanding of how to behave itself by seeing the reflection of our conversation mirroring the devotional character of the living God. And that's the wonder here. When the heart is able, when the conversation's heart is able to function without human effort, just as our organ, our heart, functions without our effort to do and to live, is the same way our conversation's character should be in regards to the underlying scope within the scriptures. So, and this is how it should be, because this is how we grow fond of the experience that we are supposed to have. This is our conversation's assignment. This is our conversation's task. And it's not easy. We are supposed to go through, and the process of this engraving is supposed to happen because our conversation must pass through anguish and perplexity within its own self. Only through confusion, only through conflict will we ever have an understanding of what should be and what should not be regarded. Why? Well, this chapter puts it simple. By the time you reach the end of it, there's a quote there from Paul that says, I delight inwardly in the law of God. I delight inwardly in the law of God. Now, this law is not necessarily the law of Moses. This law is the principle of God. Remember, God is a spirit. So this is the principle of spirit. You can go back, Romans, where Paul is saying, the law of the spirit of life in Christ Jesus has set me free from sin and death. This is the law of the spirit, the law of the spirit of life. And in this law of the spirit of life that is supposed to be etched within our conversation's inward parts, there is one part dedicated in one scheme to the 10 precepts of the living God, and then another part dedicated in one scheme to all of the principles relating to and dedicated to creation's law. These two are supposed to come together, and they do, and when studied, you can actually see the fulfillment in one another, so that our conversation may understand the liberty, that our conversation may know the liberty that it is granted through this experience of understanding its own thoughts, feelings, and character. This is the beginning of the creation of the living God, and it is not, again, a physical creation. This is the creation of a devotional character and a devotional conversation. This is the creation at hand that is supposed to take place, and that's what perfecting and reforming personal religion is about. The perfecting and the reforming part is understanding that a transition needs to take place between what we actually think is our belief into what we actually know is our individual personal belief. Bible is personal. Bible is inward. And so when we can allow our conversation to be where it needs to be, well, then we can begin and maintain the process of creation, and maintaining and initiating and continuing to remain engaged in that process of creation. It all falls back down to our human being. The mind within our flesh will see what is going on within the mind contained and confined to our conversation's conscience. And it will affect us positively. And that's really the heart of it. Really the heart of it. And as said, in the previous chapter, the central part of it is the crucifixion. But then there's an exercising of that illustration that needs to personally take place. And when that does, that's when creation actually happens.